Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making an impact, empowering the good in our community and around the globe. And today we're speaking with Limor Bergman Gross, who's leading ambitious women in tech to find the next level in their careers and achieve more through a results-oriented mentoring process. Limor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about diversity and inclusion, women in tech, personal branding tips with LinkedIn. We're going to have a great conversation today. But first, can you give listeners an idea for your background in tech and experience as an engineering leader?
So I live in Israel. I used to live, I had a 9-year where I lived in the US, and I got back here 2.5 years ago. Started my career as a software engineer. And at some point realized that I actually wanted to go into leadership. And that's a separate story if we have time. But anyway, got into management, started managing in, I think it was 2007. And then after a few years doing management here in Israel, we moved to the US. I'm married, I have 4 children. Back then they were very little. And we moved to Denver, Colorado, where I continued my career in leadership. And we moved to Texas. So we lived in different places in the US. And I love the experience, living in different states, meeting different people from different backgrounds. And when we moved back here to Israel, I decided to follow my passion to support women in the tech industry. So that's kind of a short summary of everything, like of over 20 years.
Everyone talks about diversity and inclusion. It's a hot topic on LinkedIn and in the workplace culture, but implementing it can often be unclear. How can companies build an inclusive culture? What are some of your tips for that?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Everyone talks about it. The problem is that, first of all, I think it starts, in my opinion, it starts with having diverse opinions. And diversity is not just about gender diversity, but it's diversity in different people from different backgrounds, people with, disabilities, people of color, people from different cultures. When you have a diverse organization, it already solves the problem because you're kind of forced to stay tuned to different people. And the challenge is, and at least for me was, as a woman surrounded mostly by men, is how do I feel that I belong and that I have a seat at the table and that I can grow and get to leadership positions. So companies, first of all, I think need to think about, okay, who is at the top? Do they all come from the same, in my experience was mostly white men, but are they all like the same? How can we change that? And it takes deliberate effort, and it is an effort, especially in the tech industry. For me, it was very challenging as a hiring manager to find women. So you need to take a deliberate effort, first of all, to really build diverse leadership. And I think if you have a diverse executive leadership at your company, things will follow. I always recommend starting from the top rather than the bottom. Just because people want to see role models. They want to see that the leaders actually put action to words, not just talk about it, but actually do it.
What is your advice when you look at how employees or how employers, companies can onboard new remote employees in the most effective way?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've been starting to work fully remote in 2016, and I actually started managing remote. So I didn't even think it's possible back then. Now it's kind of the norm. I think it starts with, first of all, thinking what would a new person need and building really an onboarding, a cohesive onboarding plan. First, having a more generic company onboarding plan. For example, when I started working remote, I remember that I met different divisions of the company, even if it was not related to me, right? I was leading engineers, but I met finance. I met different people from different part of the organization. It helps me feel connected to understand how the organization works. And then I had more specifically, a plan to onboard into the engineering org. And when I was hiring, I was doing the same. basically we had a generic company onboarding plan that usually the HR, team built, and then each department leader and even each manager built their own specific onboarding plan for the specific team. And it varied, right? I mean, depending on the team. And it's very important to also note which people this person should meet. And it may sound a little bit artificial, but I was actually making like a list of people. Yes, those are the people you should meet on the first week, the second week, and onwards, to make sure that they actually are able to connect with different people, which is you have to make a deliberate effort to make it when you're remote, rather than if you come to the office and you can just meet people in the corridors.
Right. I think
And I
that's
also, yeah,
oh,
and I
go
also
ahead,
like
sorry.
to build a 30, 60, 90-day plan just to make sure that the person onboarded understand, what is expected of them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And as our company continues to grow, we see that onboarding remote employees, we do have them meet a variety of our employees across different sectors, because it does help them when they do have that problem come up in accounting or, of course, HR, communications. And so for our new employees as well, it also gives them the chance, because they are living in different states, that they can go, okay, well, we had one person on our team that loves yoga. And so one of our account managers loves yoga as well. And so there's that common interest. And so as they see employee emails come through or whatnot throughout our social media, they recognize that commonality, which helps build that trust within those employees to feel like they're part of a larger team, even though they're working remote. How do employers continue to build employee culture with remote teams? I know many organizations have employee appreciation days that typically pre-pandemic, they would all come together and do things, or they would have a food truck or a blood drive all at the same location. And now with employees across the globe even, do you have any advice for how to continue to build that employee culture?
Definitely. So I think you mentioned common interests. So you can actually build, with tools, of course, for example, Slack was one of the tools I was using extensively. Just build different subgroups based on interest, not even related to work, personal. So you can help people connect. Do recognition, company-wide or department-wide, celebrate successes. It's always good, right? To showcase people. We used to have a lunch and learn every week. So you can do stuff like that where people can present what they're working on or educate people, maybe even on personal interest, right? Just give people the stage to showcase what they have done, or maybe share some things that they know. You can do different hackathons or challenges, that are remote, that people can do from their home. Find different opportunities to connect people together.
LinkedIn is a huge asset for many in building their personal brand. I know I can speak to that. LinkedIn has been a huge asset. Can you share some tips with people who want to build their personal brand on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at first it starts with the basics, right? Have a profile and think about how you want to be seen. And I think I read that a recruiter normally spends like around 6 seconds on your profile. So even if you're not seeking for a job, but think about, okay, if someone glanced at my profile for 6 seconds, what do I want them to know about me? And the best way to do it with a background picture that maybe tells a story, maybe put some tagline or whatever, something that, and also the headline is a great way to describe yourself, who you are, so people can connect with you. So first build a profile that represents you well, and then engage on the platform. And LinkedIn is growing and allowing people to connect on different ways, which is great, right? Because every person can find the right way for them to connect. You can create a newsletter, you can post, you can do lives, there are audio, events as well. So you can interact with people based on what you prefer, whether it's putting yourself on video or just writing a post or writing a longer article. So just find, and if you're shy, that's okay. I mean, take your time, just comment on other people, connect with people in groups, be more kind of someone who reacts until you feel more comfortable. And I always tell people, I try to encourage people to get out of their shell and put something out there, even something small. And the more you do it, the more you'll feel comfortable.
I agree. I tend to sometimes think of myself as an introvert in an extrovert world, especially in the role that I'm in. But I love using tools like LinkedIn and Twitter to be able to share professional insights in industry topics, but also, I think of mine as like the 80-20 rule, where 80 to really almost 90% is professional insights, tips, resources, and then that 10 to 20% is, hey, my wife and I just adopted twins, and here's our story. Are any of you adopting? Like showing the personal interest to humanize who you are, especially in this world where we may never, the possibility of you and I meeting in person is very slim, but we can learn from each other and find commonalities on our social media profiles, even in a professional setting. So I love that you're helping those with LinkedIn personal branding training, because it is so important. Talk a little bit before we go into your services, share a few tips. We did mention introverts, how introverts can network effectively.
Absolutely. And I consider myself as an introvert as well. And, I was always very intimidated going to large events. Remember, the first event I attended was Java One San Francisco Moscone Center, where there were several tens of thousands of attendees, and I was terrified, right, to start talking with people I don't know. So nowadays, it's much easier because you can do it virtually. I especially like a platform called Lunch Club, which allows you to network on a one-on-one setting, because it's less intimidating, for me at least, as an introvert, to connect on a one-on-one than in a group. Mm-hmm. So definitely look for opportunities of platforms like Lunch Club to connect with people on a one-on-one. And then you can also find, depending on your, obviously I'm more passionate about women. So there are many platforms for women you can interact virtually. Like Alpha, like Power to Fly, a company I consult to, Fairy God Boss, different organizations that focus more on women and underrepresented groups, and they have different events and different opportunities for people to connect. So find, depending on your, focus on your passion, find different groups and different organizations where you connect online. Especially for me, I mean, smaller forms work better.
I agree. I think that's some great tips. Now talk about your services helping women in tech break the glass ceiling, and your coaching and LinkedIn personal branding services.
I work both with organizations and individuals. So on individual level, I do coaching, and typically women that works with me are, they want to get to the next level in their career. It could be like from a manager to a director or whatever. I mean, and I work with them to define, what does it mean? What are the things that are stopping them? Working a lot on their inner selves, about their limiting beliefs, and building like a plan for them to execute. And that's one thing that I do with women, mostly in the tech industry, because that's like the area I come from and I can bring the most value. I also work with companies. So companies approach me either for coaching some of their employees, not necessarily just women, also men. And I also do workshops. I do workshops on presentation skills, to help people really getting their message across. I'm always amazed how many people don't know how to make a compelling presentation. So that's, for example, one thing. I do workshops on mentorship just because I created a mentorship program. So I help companies who have a mentorship program or want to start one, with consulting, depending on what they need, or a workshop or what have you. And I help also women with LinkedIn personal branding. So if women want to create a profile, or they want to improve their profile, or maybe they want to change it, then I help them figuring out what they actually want, and then how to put that on their profile. And it varies. It can be more guidance and they do the work, or sometimes I'm doing more of the heavy lifting myself, depending on their needs.
Where can people go to learn more about you, your services, and contact you?
They can go to my website, limorbergman.com, or find me on LinkedIn. It's also, the handle is also Limor Bergman, so they can get to know me a little bit. As you mentioned, like getting to know people as people is so important, right? It's not just about what we do and what kind of tips we have, but who we are as human beings.
Limor, thank you so much for this conversation, for breaking the glass ceiling for so many, and for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.